Born in the USA. Born in the USA. Come back home to the...
All right, guys. So our next speaker is a journalist and commentator from Detroit, Michigan. Anybody from Michigan? Yeah. She works as a reporter at National Review, writing columns and satire pieces that demonstrate how government outreach and cultural oversensitivity are ruining everything. She is also a contributor at Fox News, making most of her appearances on the Greg Gutfeld Show. Welcome, everybody, Kat Timpf.
On a revolution.
Yes, guys, thank you. You're all so sweet. God bless you all. Thank you. I want to apologize. I just got here like an hour ago, and I want to say I'm very sorry to those of you who saw me come in with socks and sandals on from the airport. Socks and sandals are the best way to travel, the most comfortable, so I guess I'm not that sorry. All right, I'm going to get right into it. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about free speech and limited government. Yes. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but there's a lot of attempts these days to restrict certain kinds of speech and expression. I've spent my career chronicling attempts to place limits on speech, and sometimes I have people tweet things in response to some of my articles like, so what? This is just one small thing at one college or university. Why should we care? Why are you reporting about such dumb, small stuff? You're dumb, you know? First of all, I hate Twitter, and I don't know why any of us are on this cesspool of a website. And I say that as someone who does almost nothing else ever. But I can easily tell anyone why it does matter. It matters because those small individual examples happen a lot. If it really just one instance, it might not be such a huge deal. But looking at all the examples together shows something. It's a trend. It's actually more than a trend. It's more like a cultural shift. Although we still have a constitutional right to free speech, there's definitely a huge movement on the left that wants to limit what we can and cannot say and police us and shame us and make us out to be racist or sexist or insensitive for saying even the most innocuous things. That's not a myth. That's not an overreaction. That's the absolute truth. But you don't have to take my word for it, even though you should always trust me. You don't have to take my word for it, because I'm going to take a few minutes to list some of these examples and give you an idea of the kind of cultural shift that I'm talking about. In October, a school district in Toronto announced that it would be removing the word chief from all job titles out of concern that the word is offensive to Indigenous people. Yeah, they gave the same kind of explanation that you give all the time. They want to be sensitive, but let me tell you why this is actually very stupid. Number one, the word chief didn't even originate as an Indigenous word, and none of its original meanings have anything to do with Indigenous people or their leaders. In fact, it's actually an old French word meaning highest in rank or power, most important or prominent, supreme, best. In case you haven't noticed, that's kind of the perfect word to describe a leadership position. But the story gets worse. The school district actually knew this. They knew the word didn't originate with any Indigenous meaning, but they decided to ban it anyway. Why? Because they were concerned that someone might be upset, and they wanted to be, and I quote, proactive about it. They banned a perfectly good word from job titles just because they were concerned that some hypothetical person might get hypothetically upset. Words have different meanings, and the word chief is one of them. It can mean most important. For example, as in the sentence, Postmates and Jersey Shore reruns are the chief reason I stayed in my apartment all last weekend. It's true, I love Snooki. I don't know about you guys, but I also think it's fun. I sometimes personally call my dad Chief instead of Dad. If you haven't tried it, you should. I'm sure you'll love it. But none of these meanings are offensive, and we should be able to use the word and not ban it out of concern that it might offend someone someday. Like I said, words have different meanings, and there should be nothing wrong with using a word in an innocent way, like, for example, as a job title. Think about it. There's actually a lot of innocent words that might have been used in a derogatory way at some point in time. That's the thing about this story that bothers me the most. The idea that we should just proactively get rid of words. That no actual person actually even needs to be offended by a word in order to preemptively ban it. I mean, we already have enough people getting offended at innocent words as it is. We can't go around banning the ones that people have not even been offended at yet. If that keeps up, we're really not even going to be able to talk at all. Unfortunately, by the way, this school district is definitely not the only place that's decided it's a good idea to just preemptively ban things. An American University fraternity fundraiser for veterans was canceled over concerns that the name of it, which was Badminton and Bougie, might be cultural appropriation. Concerns that it might be. The entire fundraiser had to wind up being canceled preemptively, even though not even a single student had actually come out to say they were offended. What's more, the Toronto School District is not the only place changing job titles to be more PC. Rice University, Princeton, Yale, and Harvard have all stopped using the term master in job titles over concerns that it has a connotation to slavery, even though, yeah, you know, it's been used in many ways that have nothing to do with slavery. Think about it. We've got the masters, we got master bedroom, we got master chef. I mean, should we change master bedroom to the biggest bedroom in the house bedroom? Should we change master chef to the chef that is the best chef out of all the chef contestants? Just to avoid any potential negative connotations? What about mastermind? Better start saying the mind that had the most to do with the thing? The word master can describe having talent in pretty much any area. Are all these uses going to be offensive too? The word master plays such a large role in the English language. Just how much are we going to have to change our current dictionary if this cultural trend catches on? There are also many words other than master that could be considered offensive based on the standard of association with slavery. For example, people with slaves were also called slave owners, which, if you notice, has the word owner in it. The exact same logic that's leading Rice and other colleges to get rid of the word master would also demand that words and phrases such as homeowner, pet owner, and girl own it be changed. And sorry, I don't really think I will ever refer to myself as a possessor of a pet because I have a cat. I'm gonna run through a few more examples quickly just so you guys, and I hope I didn't like offend you by saying you guys because I've heard that's misogynistic. I'm not from the South, I don't say y'all. Detroit, we don't really say y'all over there. So I hope I didn't bring any of you to tears or rage by being too offensive. But I'm glad to see you're all still sitting there and you're okay. Cambridge University has warned its examiners not to use words such as flair, genius, or brilliance, referring to students' work because they, quote, carry assumptions of gender inequality. I don't get it either. I don't get it either. A Massachusetts state lawmaker wanted to remove a sign at a door entrance that's named after Union Army General Joseph Hooker because the word hooker is offensive to women. The lawmaker even used the Me Too hashtag. I am not joking, and that is such a problem because using the Me Too hashtag to share such a stupid complaint diminishes the gravity of the real sexual assault and harassment offenses that it's meant to describe. Thank you. Not to mention that if you're a woman and you want to be taken seriously as an equal, autonomous individual, then you're really not doing yourself any favors by saying you're too weak to be able to handle walking under a door sign named after General Hooker. I know I can handle it, not trying to brag. All right, more examples. A student at Francis Marion University wrote an op-ed explaining how upset she gets when people who aren't from the South say y'all because it's cultural appropriation. So you can't say you guys, can't say y'all. I don't know. This group of people, I don't know what you're supposed to say. An anti-oppression library guide written by a group of librarians at Simmons College in Boston stated that saying God bless you after someone sneezes is a microaggression against Muslim people. A professor at Brooklyn College of City University, New York, was forced to change his syllabus after a portion stating that effort was 10% of the grade was deemed sexual harassment. I know. It should really be clear to anyone who is not a completely insane person that effort refers to things like class participation and not to things like sexual favors. If anyone were to look at that syllabus and think, he's saying I have to do sex stuff to improve my grade, then that person would be the one with the problem. All right, any of you guys in sororities at all? Okay, well, I was too. Students at the University of California, Merced were reportedly told they shouldn't use the words Greek, rush, or pledge, because that's appropriating Greek culture and not inclusive. And if you're concerned about appropriating Greek culture, then you're going to have to tell people not to use geometry or democracy either. A writing guide at Purdue University advised students to avoid words with man in them, such as mailman and mankind, in order to write in a non-sexist, non-biased way. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau actually corrected a woman who said mankind at a town hall event, telling her to say peoplekind instead. Even aside from the fact that peoplekind is not a word, that's still absolutely crazy. If I had been in that situation as a woman and had a man tell me that I was discriminating against my own self through the use of the words I myself had chosen to use, then I think my head would have exploded. He didn't come off as being caring or compassionate. He came off as being sanctimonious and ridiculous, which isn't surprising, seeing as sanctimoniousness is really what a lot of this movement is really about. All right, more examples. According to a piece in the Huffington Post, the term LGBT is not politically correct because it's just not inclusive enough. According to a document at Rowan University's official website, the phrase gender plays no part in who we hire is a microaggression, and you should intervene and correct people if you even overhear someone saying it. A petition demanded that a British supermarket stop selling children's t-shirt featuring a picture of a melting snowman with the words "I'm having a meltdown" on the grounds that it's insensitive to the mentally ill. Yeah. A professor at the University of Kentucky is claiming that he was punished for sexual misconduct for reasons including the fact that he sang a Beach Boys song during one of his classes. He sang a version of California Girls, which was apparently too sexual for these college kids to handle, even though Alvin and the Chipmunks have covered it before. I am pretty sure that Alvin and the Chipmunks are not too sexual for college students, for anyone. I, in fact, find nothing sexual about Alvin and the Chipmunks. All right, more. A guide titled "Words That Hurt" on the website of the University of California, Davis warns students to avoid using the words lame or crazy. So saying, "Wow, this concert is lame," or "last night was crazy," is an example of something that really hurts people. Got it. More. According to a post in the social justice blog Everyday Feminism, blog is a gem. The blog is a gem. The word stupid is not just kind of a mean thing to say, but actually an all-out ableist slur, regardless of whether you're using it to describe people or things. It claimed that using the word stupid, even if you were describing a thing and not a person, is actually contributing to the sexual assault of children and creating, quote, mass psychological harm. An environmentalist group, March for Science, posted a tweet asking females who had changed their minds about engineering careers to offer suggestions for how to make the field more welcoming to women, only having to end up apologizing for using the word female. Cardiff Metropolitan University in Wales is instructing its students and teachers not to use potentially discriminatory words like housewife. Believe it or not, housewife is still a badge of honor for some, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's certainly not an offensive word. Last year, flyers popped up at the University of Kansas campus warning students that neo-Nazis and hate groups will use coded language to avoid being called what they are, and said that "Make America Great Again" is an example of this language. It's obviously not true. "Make America Great Again" is literally a campaign slogan for the guy who won. Not some kind of secret language of any kind. But this isn't the only example quite like that either. In 2016, the bias response group at Skidmore College determined that writing "Make America Great Again" on dry erase boards amounted to performing, quote, racialized targeted attacks, according to the group's year-end report. In May, a student at the University of Oregon warned in an op-ed that it's wrong for conservatives to say they're ever a minority in certain environments because the word minority is basically just not for straight, white, cisgender people, especially men. The piece, by the way, did not address whether or not people who are ethnic minorities or women and also conservatives are allowed to use the phrase conservatives or a minority, because perhaps she did not realize that not all conservatives are straight white men. Anyway, more examples. I told you this was a cultural shift. According to materials distributed by the University of Missouri Diversity Office, saying "you people are so inspiring" in reference to disabled people is not only not nice, but actually a microaggression. Last year, King's College in London started paying people £12 per hour to police speaking events on campus and take immediate action they hear anything that might offend the audience. Seeing as the list of things that are being deemed offensive is clearly growing by the day, which you know too if you've been listening, it seems as though it could potentially be quite difficult to get through a speech at King's College at all. I mean, this becomes especially obvious when you think about what kind of person would actually sign up to be a safe space marshal in the first place. Most likely, these are people who have an obsession with safe spaces and microaggressions, and at least enough sanctimonious arrogance to actually feel that they have the authority to police other people's speech. In other words, the kind of people who are generally the most ridiculous when it comes to declaring the innocuous to be unacceptable. Unfortunately, this kind of microaggression marshal thing isn't just unique to London. Hate to break it to you guys, but it's here in the United States too. Carl Sandburg College in Illinois announced last year that it may put students through disciplinary proceedings for using offensive language or disparaging comments. Also last year, Illinois State University started offering a bystander training program on microaggressions. And again, I could not possibly think of a more intolerable person to hang out with than someone who is a microaggressions bystander. These are people who were hired to intervene on behalf of someone else if they thought the other person should be offended by someone's speech. It's one thing to intervene on behalf of yourself if someone has said something that offends you. It's a completely another thing to feel like you need to intervene on behalf of someone else, especially if you have no idea whether or not that other person is actually bothered. First of all, it could wind up being incredibly patronizing. The instance of the you guys example, the schools that have declared you guys to be offensive include University of California, Davis, Malacaster College, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and many more. I personally am not offended by you guys. But if I were sitting in a group and someone came up to me and said, "Hey guys," to us, I would be totally fine with it. And if some microaggressions bystander who was not even a part of the conversation felt the need to march up and say, "Hey, that's actually offensive to that lady over there," I would not only not appreciate it, but I'd also be offended by that person suggesting that I am somehow not emotionally equipped to hear a phrase that I actually find so harmless that I use it myself. Training a group of college kids to think they will be heroes for intervening in private conversations because they're just like so much more socially aware than the rest of us sounds like a great way to create a bunch of socially obnoxious monsters. I don't know who would want to be around people who made a habit of running up to other people to police the speech and conversations that they weren't even a part of. Think about it. Everything from suggesting golf outings to telling someone that he should like the Beatles has been declared a microaggression at this point. I've written articles about all of those examples. Could you even imagine trying to have a conversation at a party with one of these bystanders waiting in the wings, ready to pounce at any sign of something that could be potentially offensive? Honestly, if I were in college still and I were throwing a party, I'd be careful to make sure that none of these do-gooders were there to run all my guests away with their self-righteous interruptions. I would much rather invite the guy who has a habit of getting too drunk and puking in the houseplants than a member of the self-righteous speech police who thinks he knows what should and should not be allowed in conversation better than the people who are actually having it. One of the great things about being individuals in a free society is that we get to decide what's best for us. We get to decide which friends we associate with. We get to decide what we are or not willing to accept in our conversations with those friends. This training program, put simply, is a public university using its funds to create an army of obnoxiousness, and I would highly recommend that it find a better use for its resources. I often feel like I'm smoking something when I write and speak about this microaggressions and language police type stuff, but I'm not. It's all true. It's easy, of course, to laugh, but it really is kind of sad, too. This is especially true considering that there's this dangerous idea, particularly on college campuses, that speech is violence or that it is dangerous. In April, a student group at California State University, Chico, issued a warning telling students to, quote, be safe and potentially avoid the area where Republican students were planning to sit with a sign that said, "I'm pro-gun, change my mind." All the group was intending to do was start a peaceful, open conversation about the Second Amendment with people who disagree with them. And this group actually had concerns about literal safety. That's not just extreme, it's stupid. The truth is, no one actually has to avoid an area just because it may contain people peacefully debating a policy question. If you really cannot even stand to be in the same area of campus where there will be someone who disagrees with you, then there is something wrong with you. You do not have what it takes to function as a member of society. And you should probably seek some help with that sooner rather than later if you want to be able to live a normal adult life. A life that will, by the way, often require you to be in with people who have different viewpoints from yours and not have a complete and total meltdown. Unfortunately, those students aren't the only ones that think speech about guns is in itself somehow dangerous. In February, a school district in Louisiana launched a new policy stating that even an accusation that a student had been talking about a gun would result in that student being investigated by the school board, the sheriff's department, and the district attorney's office. It's not just guns either. I know a lot of you guys came here to see Ben Shapiro speak, right? Turns out that means you guys are some real tough cookies. In January, the University of Connecticut offered counseling to any students who might be upset at, and I quote, even the thought of a Ben Shapiro speech. That's right, not even the speech itself, but even the thought of one of his speeches. Keep in mind that this is just a single speech. I don't have very much time. There are countless more examples of this kind of stupidity. If I took the time to go through any example I've ever written about, I would probably be here all day long, and I don't want to do that because I'm already kind of hungry. But I also want to have time to point out the fact that this is far beyond and far worse just attempted specific restrictions of speech. It's worse than people who want to just make certain words socially unacceptable. Lately, I've seen actual threats to our constitutional rights. Lately, I've been hearing people bold enough to say that we should actually do away with the First Amendment as it stands. A student at the University of California, Santa Barbara, wrote an op-ed calling for the United States to do away with the First Amendment. She actually wrote, and I quote, "There should be a line where free speech stops being a right and starts being a threat to the very idea of America." Ironically, the only reason she even had the ability to make that kind of statement about the First Amendment was because of the amendment itself. If we didn't have free speech, speaking out against a sacred founding principle could easily be seen as illegal or even treasonous. In another country, she could have gotten her head chopped off. Now, she tried to defend her argument by saying she wants to outlaw only the speech of movements that try to oppress minorities, which may seem like a simple, clear-cut solution, but the truth is everyone has a different idea of what does and does not qualify. Believe me, in covering college campuses and politically correct culture for the past few years, I know firsthand just how many things some people would put on that list. And you should have some idea of how many things might wind up illegal after listening to the first portion of this speech. But it goes far beyond just one single student. This year's annual Constitution Day lecture at Princeton University was titled F-Word, Free Speech, and an anthropologist's take on campus speech debates, and maintained that the Academy has never promoted free speech as a central value. In May, the president of Santa Monica College instructed students to report incidents of hate speech to the police. To the college's credit, a spokesman for the college did acknowledge that hate speech is not illegal, but she also said that she still thought it was important to report these incidents because, quote, the role of campus police is to preserve peace. That's, of course, not true. The role of the police isn't to preserve peace, it's to deal with things that are crimes. That's why if I ever get into a little tiff with a friend, I don't call 911. Assume you guys don't either. Maybe your boyfriend doesn't text you back, you get a little mad, but you don't call 911, right? You understand the difference between what is and is not criminal. Even though the campus police in this situation obviously don't have the power to actually punish anyone for the hate speech that gets reported, because that obviously would be unconstitutional, I still think that this is a problem and a big deal. The fact that students are even being asked to file these reports is scary enough. Think about it. The college is essentially telling these students that hate speech does fall under the jurisdiction of the police, that the things that you say should be scrutinized by the state, that it is the state's job to scrutinize them. Even if they don't have the power to do anything, that's still terrifying stuff. There are more examples. In October, a group of students at the University of California, Santa Cruz, crashed a college Republicans meeting at the school, demanding that it be shut down because fascists don't have the right of free speech. They are, of course, wrong. Even if those college Republicans literally were fascists, which is an absurd accusation, but even if they were, they would still have a right to free speech, and they should. And why they should is something that I'll get into a bit later. But just real quick as an aside, Isn't it interesting how often those Antifa and anti-fascist people who try to stop speech kind of sound like fascists themselves? Last year, Ann Coulter had to cancel her speech at UC Berkeley because of violent threats from protesters, and yet somehow her invitation was what was being discussed as an example of fascism. Think about that for a second. Violent threats to stop speech. That's what fascists do. How are you going to call yourself an anti-fascist when you're acting like one? I don't know. It blows my mind. Anyway, in addition to people who don't like the First Amendment, there are people who don't understand it. A depressing number of people, actually. This has been evident in some of the movements on campus. In addition to those student protesters who just didn't understand that a fascist actually would have a right to free speech, there was a feminist group at the University of Mary Washington that filed a Title IX lawsuit with the school, claiming that it failed to protect them from a sexually hostile school environment because it didn't block a social media app on which students were saying bad things. In general, there are a lot of people who can't handle speech they disagree with, but I personally take the opposite point of view. It's not just that I'm able to handle it, it's that I absolutely love hearing it. I kind of love hearing speech that offends me. Let me explain why. There's been a lot of talk, some of which I referred to earlier, about language being violence and students needing safe spaces from speeches or from certain kinds of speech. I don't feel that way. When I think about something that would really impact my sense of safety, it wouldn't be someone giving a speech, no matter how offensive or inflammatory that speaker might be. In fact, it would be the opposite. A public institution failing to protect a speaker's First Amendment rights because of his or her views would cause me to think that something serious had gone wrong. I would much rather hear the worst person imaginable be giving a speech than hear that someone's constitutional rights would be denied. In fact, if I were given the choice between someone being allowed to speak to a packed house about how awful I am and denying the person the right to give that speech, I'd easily choose the former. Because I realized that the same rules I'd be using to stop speech I didn't like could someday be used to silence my own. It can be tough to hear someone say something that offends you, but it can also be comforting to know that you have the freedom to say it. After all, that means no one will ever have the power to shut you up either. Far too many people fail to understand that it's very important to protect speech, all speech. Yes, the kind of speech that you hear coming from fascists and white supremacists makes a lot of people uncomfortable, myself included. I've definitely spoken out against these beliefs and the people who espouse them many, many times. But the thing is, that's exactly what you're supposed to do with the speech you don't like in this country. Use your own speech to counter it. Giving a government the right to take away the speech of a group that makes people uncomfortable does nothing but give the government the power to take away your voice should you happen to cross some subjective line of comfort. I would never, ever want to risk living in a world like that, not for anything. And I say this as someone who has herself been a target of hate speech many times. I've been told that I should die. I've been called every name in the book. I've been told that my Polish Catholic ancestors should have been exterminated in the Holocaust. I've heard it all. Yet I still defend free speech. When people try to fight me on this or challenge me on why I feel that way, I just have to ask them, if you want to limit speech, who do you think should get to decide what should be limited? The government? And are you sure? Many people on the left want the government to have the power to restrict more speech. But then they also believe that the current leader of our government is an awful, evil, racist Hitler of a man. So I don't understand how those two views make sense together, and I think that some of those people really need to think about it. You might want laws to silence bigots, but the truth is those are the exact kind of laws that could someday be used to silence you. Everyone, after all, has a different view of what does and does not constitute hate speech. It can be terrifying to encounter hateful speech, believe me, I know, but having a government that can protect you from it means that your own rights are subject to the whims of whoever happens to be in power at the time. And that, to me, is far more terrifying. The government, after all, already has too much power. I can't carry a gun in New York City, which I believe is a violation of my Second Amendment rights. Every day, I see more examples of government overreach. Did you know that this year, California had been considering a bill that would publish waiters at sit-down restaurants with up to 6 months in jail and a fine of up to $1,000 for offering customers plastic straws? Yeah. Last year, a woman in Florida was being threatened with jail time for offering unlicensed diet tips. To clarify, this person was not actually tying people up in her basement and forcing them to listen to her diet tips at gunpoint. These were people who wanted her tips and who were choosing to pay for them. It's a completely voluntary, mutually agreed upon agreement, and yet Florida still somehow felt the need to intervene. The state has fined her more than $750 for being an unlicensed dietitian and has warned her that she will face fines of $1,000 per incident, possibly a year in jail if she continues. She got busted, by the way, because an undercover someone looking for diet tips busted her. The fact that we have those makes me really upset because my taxes are very high and I would be more than willing to do without that. Second of all, there are plenty of licensed dietitians out there that don't know what they're talking about. I know this because many of them say different things. Sometimes they say opposite things. A lot of them will tell you that whole wheat options are the best. Some of you tell you gluten's the devil. Some will say high lean meat protein. Others will say all meat's bad for you. I don't know who's right. I eat bagels. All I'm saying is that some have to be right and some have to be wrong, which means there are some people whom Florida is allowing to give other people wrong nutritional advice without penalty just because they're technically licensed to do so. I think it should just be a free-for-all. It's ridiculous, but it's far from the only time something like this has happened. In 2016, a single mom faced a year in jail for selling a pita of ceviche to an undercover cop. I'm serious. She was cited for selling an illegal substance because she didn't have a permit to sell food. All these undercover cops, I don't know. It seems like could be better use. There are a million other examples that I could give of government overreach, but it's almost time to wrap up, and I want to give you guys some time to ask some questions. The most beautiful thing about this country is our freedom and our individual rights. We have to do everything in our power to ensure that our First Amendment, Second Amendment, and all of our other rights stay protected and don't give in to those who say otherwise. All right, that I'll take some questions. I don't know how this works, so I decide the questions, or is there someone with a microphone? Let's pick whoever you want. I don't want to pick, it makes me nervous. Hello.
Hi. So I'm actually 12, so I'm in middle school right now. I was here last year too, when I was 11. So I'm from Portland, Oregon, so it's very left-leaning, it's very liberal. And I go to a Catholic school, and I face political correctness every day of my life. I've been told by a white teacher that I can't say if it's better in Blacks for America since the 60s because I'm not Black. She's not Black either. So how, can younger conservatives who, I know I have friends who aren't necessarily, ready to speak their minds yet, but they still, I don't know really what I'm saying.
No, you're doing great.
So how can younger people fight this when they don't really have a platform to?
I think that every day you have opportunities just by the way that you live your life, to live your life in a way that's in line with your beliefs. And by not caring what other people think is the most important thing you can do. Because by staying true to yourself, you never have to worry about, I can't sleep at night because I said or did something just to try to make myself fit in. That's not what's most important. What's most important is staying true to yourself and your beliefs. And, social media is a great platform, and there's really no, it's actually not a great platform. It's a hellish platform, but it is a platform. And there's a lot of ways to get your voice out there, but I think the best way is to even just start also on a smaller scale with just making sure you stay true to your beliefs and not saying anything that you don't agree with just to fit in. Right.
We have one over here to your right.
Oh, there's multiple microphones. Okay.
Hi, Kat. My name is Allegra. I'm from New York, and I understand the struggle with the gun concealed carry permits. It's impossible, but best believe I'm going for it, and I'm going to be a trained shooter. Best believe. I love watching you on Fox. I love Fox in general. I think it's a great platform for us rising conservatives, and best believe I'm going to get there one day. So with that, because I'm definitely trying to network myself and get on the platform and, deliver, our messages just like you and Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, all them. So my question for you is, what's it like being a Fox contributor, and what's the best advice for being effective on air with message and delivery?
It's really fun. It's very fun, particularly to work with Gutfeld. He's a fun guy. It's really great to have a platform, and I think that the best thing to do is to be prepared before you even have a chance to be on TV, to be prepared for when you will be on TV, to know the issues. I don't just prepare per appearance. I'm constantly preparing by watching the news every day, reading the news every day, reading the news from various sources. So that way, if I do get a text message, which sometimes I do, hey, can you be on Cavuto in 20 minutes to talk about this? I don't have to like form a strong opinion on an issue in 20 minutes, which would be impossible. So just staying informed, and in terms of getting there, for me, what it was writing. I was a writer for years before I ever had a TV appearance, and I ended up getting on for my writing. So I know writing is not as glamorous, but it's still kind of my main job, and something I'll always do. And it's a great way to kind of get your name out there, especially with social media. It's easy for things to go viral and all that. Isn't it? I feel like I'm looking at like chasing fireflies or something with all these microphones everywhere.
Hello.
Hello.
My name's Abby. I am from Orlando, Florida. And my question is, do you think that public universities are becoming a more authoritative quasi-government actor in society? And how do we combat that? Like, how do we take away their power and over these minds?
Yes, I do. With all I write about, I certainly do think that. And I think that the best thing to do is to expose it. I write about it all the time. There's campus reform, there's the college fix. You can send tips to those places, or you can write about it yourself and get it out there. Because if it weren't for these news sources, nobody would really know just how insane it is on a lot of these campuses. And a lot of people who are actually on these campuses have an opportunity to get that out there and have their voices be heard, because there are a lot of reasonable people out there in the world. It might not feel like that always in a bubble of a college campus, but there are a lot of reasonable people out there who realize how ridiculous these things are and will have your back and support you.
Sweet, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One over here to your right.
Where am I?
To your right over here.
This is way harder than I thought. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kendra. I'm from Missouri. I wanted to ask you a question about homeschooling. I was homeschooled. It was a huge part of my life, and what enabled me to start my own business and all these amazing things that I got from my mom and my dad. In Missouri, there's a lot of legislation that's always coming up about making it illegal. And with the current trend of a lot of sexual things being taught to kindergartners and people who are very, very young, especially about transgenderism, homeschooling is a rising trend, but this legislation is still being brought up. So I was wondering about your opinion on that, and if you think that homeschooling should be legal, what are some steps that we could take to protect it?
I'm a libertarian, so I think almost everything should be legal. I was homeschooled myself for 2 years, and I don't think I would be where I am if I wasn't homeschooled for those 2 years, because it gave me an opportunity to learn the way that I learned. When I was in public school, I had a little bit of trouble with math. Then I was homeschooled for 2 years, and my dad taught me math in a different way, and then I didn't have trouble with it anymore. So I think that everyone should be able to have that opportunity, and it should definitely be legal to help have parents be able to give their kids that kind of attention if the parents are able to do so.
Hi, my name's Hope, and I'm from California, and many of your examples of college campuses were from California.
Yep.
With the unlimited safe spaces and politically correct police. And I was just wondering if you have any suggestions to help combat that.
I think, like I said before, I think what you can do is expose these things, because it can feel when you're on that campus like it's normal, but it's not normal. It's really not normal. When you get out into the real world, people think it's ridiculous. People think it's crazy. And you can't worry too much about, you're only going to be in college for a couple years. I mean, and you can't worry too much about how it's going to impact, are people going to, be mad at me? People are mad at me all the time, and you just kind of keep going and don't care. And you really have an opportunity, if you want to work on exposing these things and maybe writing about them and getting involved and being an activist, you have an opportunity to actually make a name for yourself outside of college and beyond, which is a lot more valuable than fitting in with a bunch of weirdos, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, we've got the last question over here.
Last question? All right.
Hi, I'm Alex. I was just wondering, since you're from Detroit, with the Flint water crisis being such an issue, do you feel like the media isn't putting enough pressure on the Trump administration to fix this problem? Because I feel like if we could put pressure on fixing this problem, that would be a huge thing going into the next presidential election.
I think that would be a great thing to put more pressure on fixing that problem. Absolutely. I feel like the fact that it's still a problem is pretty unbelievable and very sad. Flint's not that far from where I'm from, and the fact that it still hasn't been fixed makes me sad. And I think that there probably should be more of an emphasis put on that. All right, that's it. Thank you, guys. Thank you.